You're old enough to kill, but not for voting. You don't believe in war.
They banned this song for being too obscene, but the FBI spent 31 months investigating it and found nothing. So why did radio stations refuse to play it? The truth is shocking, and I'll tell you in just a second. 10. 8 Miles High. The Byrds, 1966. Imagine writing a song so ahead of its time that it gets banned before it even has a chance to take off. Radio stations called it dangerous and corrupting, but the band swore it was innocent. What was so risque about this track? It's 1966. The world is shifting. Psychedelic rock is emerging, and the Byrds are at the forefront of this movement. Then, out of nowhere, their newest song, 8 Miles High, is pulled from major radio stations across the US. The reason? Officials claimed it promoted drug use. The dreamy, surreal lyrics combined with its experimental sound made it an instant target. 8 Miles High, and when you touch down, you'll find that it's stranger than known. Lines like this convinced authorities that it was a coded message about LSD trips. But here's where things get interesting. The Byrds denied it completely. According to Gene Clark, who co-wrote the song, 8 Miles High was about the band's first trip to England. He explained it was about an airplane ride. It wasn't about drugs at all. But if that was the case, why did radio stations still refuse to play it? Because in the 1960s, perception was everything. The song featured a fuzzed-out guitar solo inspired by jazz legend John Coltrane, which made it sound chaotic and trippy. Combine that with its mystical, free-flowing lyrics, and it became the perfect scapegoat for America's growing fears about drug culture. And here's where things get even crazier. While 8 Miles High was being banned, the Beatles released Tomorrow Never Knows, a song undeniably influenced by LSD trips. That song? No ban. No controversy. So why were the Byrds targeted? Some say it was because they weren't as powerful as the Beatles and therefore easier to silence. Others believe it was part of a larger crackdown on emerging psychedelic music, a warning shot to other bands. But the controversy only made the song bigger. Fans smuggled bootleg copies. Underground stations played it in defiance. By banning it, they turned it into an anthem. And here's the kicker. Years later, even the Byrds admitted that while the song wasn't originally about drugs, it did become associated with the psychedelic movement. Roger McGuinn, the band's guitarist, said, "The song took on a life of its own. It became part of that culture whether we intended it or not." So in the end, the band didn't kill the song. It did the opposite. It made 8 Miles High legendary. And if you think banning a song for sounding like a drug trip is extreme, wait until you hear about the next one. It was so suggestive, a band was forced to change its lyrics live on TV. Stay with me, because what happened next was absolutely wild. 9. Let's Spend the Night Together. The Rolling Stones, 1967. It started with one simple line, just 6 words. But those words were apparently too much for 1960s America. One of the most famous rock bands in history was forced to change their lyrics live on national television. The Rolling Stones were no strangers to controversy, but when they released Let's Spend the Night Together in 1967, they found themselves at war with censors, radio stations, and even television executives. At first glance, the song isn't violent, it isn't political, it doesn't even have any explicit language. So why did it get banned? Because back in the 1960s, even hinting at premarital sex was considered scandalous. And Mick Jagger wasn't just hinting at it, he was singing it loud and clear. Radio stations across the US refused to play the song. Some banned it outright, while others only aired it at night, when they assumed fewer impressionable young ears were listening. But things really escalated when the Rolling Stones were invited to perform it on The Ed Sullivan Show. At the time, The Ed Sullivan Show was America's biggest variety program. It launched the careers of the Beatles and Elvis Presley, but it also had strict rules about content. Producers told Mick Jagger, change the lyrics or don't perform at all. Jagger was furious. He knew the band's reputation was built on rebellion, but at the same time, The Ed Sullivan Show was too big to turn down. So reluctantly, they agreed. But when the cameras rolled, Mick Jagger did something no one expected. Instead of singing, "Let's spend the night together," he rolled his eyes dramatically and sang, "Let's spend some time together." The audience knew exactly what was happening. It was an act of defiance right in front of millions of viewers. But here's the twist. Despite the censorship, the song became a massive hit. Fans already knew the real lyrics. The controversy only made people more eager to hear it. And it gets even better. While Let's Spend the Night Together was being banned for being too sexual, the Doors performed Light My Fire on the same show. And Jim Morrison refused to censor his lyrics. The result? The Doors were banned from the show forever. But the Rolling Stones? They played along just enough to keep their career on track while still making it clear they weren't happy about it. Years later, Mick Jagger admitted it was ridiculous, but we had to play the game for a while. In the end, Let's Spend the Night Together became a symbol of rock's battle against censorship. And it wasn't the last time the Rolling Stones would push boundaries. But if you think a band being forced to change their lyrics on live TV is wild, wait until you hear about the next song. The BBC was so convinced it was about drugs, they refused to play it at all. And the band? They swore it was just a kid's drawing. Stay with me, because what happened next was even crazier. 8. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. The Beatles, 1967. It's one of the most famous songs in music history. A surreal, dreamlike journey through a world of tangerine trees and marmalade skies. But in 1967, the BBC wasn't buying it. They were convinced this song was a secret code for something far more dangerous. The moment Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was released, people couldn't help but notice something. Look at the first letters of the main words in the title. LSD. It was the peak of the psychedelic movement. LSD was the drug of the era. People weren't just experimenting with it, entire music genres were being shaped by it. So when the Beatles dropped a song that sounded like an acid trip set to music, it wasn't long before authorities got involved.
Tired of expensive, low-effort script writers for your YouTube channel? Autoscripter.ai is the ultimate solution. Say goodbye to low-quality, poorly retention amateur scripts that fail to generate thousands of views for your channel. At a fraction of the cost, Autoscripter.ai helps your videos go viral. In just 3 steps, Autoscripter.ai creates a polished script tailored to your needs. Just input your title concept, select your tone and style. The intuitive interface makes editing and refining effortless, fast, smart, and trusted by hundreds of satisfied users who have already discovered the amazing tool. Start your free trial today and watch Autoscripter.ai transform your YouTube channel. Just click the link in the video description below now.
The BBC banned it instantly. They refused to play it, claiming it was an endorsement of drug use. Some American stations followed suit, pulling it from the airwaves. But here's where things take a strange turn. John Lennon swore the song had nothing to do with LSD. According to him, it was inspired by a drawing his 4-year-old son Julian had made in school. Julian had shown his father a picture of a school friend, Lucy O'Donnell, floating in a sky filled with bright, sparkling diamonds. He even told John, "It's Lucy in the sky with diamonds." Lennon said, "I swear to God I had no idea it spelled LSD until someone pointed it out later." But if it really was innocent, why did it sound exactly like an acid trip? Because Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the album Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was on, was undeniably influenced by drugs. Paul McCartney later admitted, "A lot of our songs at that time were influenced by LSD. But Lucy? That was a coincidence." Coincidence or not, the controversy only made the song more legendary. Fans wanted to believe it was about something bigger. They dissected every lyric looking for hidden meanings. The most famous theory? The girl with kaleidoscope eyes was a reference to hallucinations. And the newspaper taxis appearing on the shore? A vision of a world melting away. The BBC's ban didn't stop the song from becoming one of the Beatles' most iconic hits. In fact, it made people more desperate to hear it. But if you think banning a song over a mistaken drug reference is crazy, wait until you hear what happened next. The next song wasn't banned for drugs, sex, or rebellion. It was banned because of a stutter. And the band's reaction? Pure rock and roll defiance. Stay with me, because this one is unbelievable.
Lucy in the sky with diamonds. Lucy in the sky.
7. My Generation. The Who. 1965. Some songs define an era. Some songs ignite a movement. And some terrify the establishment. That's exactly what happened when The Who dropped My Generation in 1965. The BBC didn't hesitate. They banned it. Not for drug references, not for profanity, not for anything you'd expect. They banned it because of a stutter. If you've heard the song, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Roger Daltrey's aggressive delivery made it sound like he was struggling to get the words out. Why don't you all fade away? At first glance, it's just a stylistic choice, a way to make the song feel raw and rebellious. But the BBC wasn't convinced. They feared that the stuttering vocals might offend people with speech impediments. So, in true 1960s fashion, they banned it from radio. But here's the irony. This decision only made My Generation more powerful. Because this wasn't just a song. It was an anthem for frustrated youth. The Who weren't just performing, they were speaking for an entire generation that felt ignored, underestimated, and misunderstood. When Roger Daltrey sang, "Hope I die before I get old," it wasn't just a lyric, it was a declaration. And banning the song? That only made kids want to hear it more. Pete Townsend, The Who's guitarist, later admitted that the stutter wasn't even planned. He just did it in the studio and it felt right. He even said it was supposed to sound like someone on speed. And that's where things get even wilder. Because while the BBC claimed they banned My Generation for the stutter, some people believe the real reason was something much bigger. In 1965, the mod movement was in full swing. Teenagers wearing sharp suits, riding scooters, clashing with authority. My Generation wasn't just a song, it was their battle cry. And the British establishment? They saw it as a threat. Banning it was their way of trying to silence an entire subculture. But it didn't work. The Who's defiance made My Generation even more legendary. Today, it's ranked as one of the greatest rock songs of all time. And Daltrey? He still sings the line, "Hope I die before I get old," even at 80 years old. But if you think a song getting banned over a stutter is bizarre, wait until you hear what happened next. Because the next track? It was banned for being too dangerous, and what it predicted turned out to be terrifyingly accurate.
Don't you all tell me about my generation.
6. Eve of Destruction. Barry Maguire. 1965. Some songs entertain, some inspire, and some shake the world so hard they get banned for being too dangerous. That's exactly what happened with Eve of Destruction, a song that didn't just describe chaos, it predicted it. Released in 1965, this haunting protest anthem painted a brutally honest picture of the world. Vietnam, the Cold War, racial injustice, political corruption. Barry Maguire's raw, raspy voice delivered lyrics so intense, radio stations refused to play it. And the reason? They thought it would spread panic. The opening line alone was enough to put people on edge. The Eastern world, it is exploding. In the middle of the Cold War, those words hit differently. The song called out politicians, questioned authority, and exposed uncomfortable truths. You're old enough to kill, but not for votin'. That line alone got the song pulled from stations, because at the time, young men were being drafted for war at 18 years old, but they couldn't vote until 21. And that wasn't the only lyric that got people talking. If the button is pushed, there's no running away. In 1965, the fear of nuclear war was very real.
You're old enough to kill, but not for voting. You don't believe in war.
The Cuban Missile Crisis had just happened. The Soviet Union and the US were stockpiling nuclear weapons. To millions of listeners, the song wasn't just music, it was a warning. But the US government? They saw it as a threat. Radio stations in 16 states banned the song outright. They claimed it would demoralize soldiers and encourage rebellion. Even the British government tried to block it from the airwaves, calling it a tool of anti-war propaganda. And it didn't stop there. A group of US congressmen tried to get the song outlawed nationally. They labeled it a dangerous influence on young people. But here's the irony. Banning the song only made it more powerful. Protesters played it during rallies. College students blasted it from their dorm windows. It became the unofficial anthem of the anti-war movement. Barry Maguire later said, "I had no idea it would cause so much trouble. I was just singing about what I saw happening." And here's where things get eerie. Many of the issues Eve of Destruction warned about, they got worse. Vietnam escalated. Protests turned violent. The civil rights movement faced brutal resistance. And nuclear tensions? They still haven't gone away. The song was banned for being too negative, but everything it predicted came true. And if you think a song exposing the truth was controversial, wait until you hear what happened next. The next track? It was so powerful, entire states refused to play it. And when you hear why, you'll understand why they were so afraid. Stay with me, because this one hit the world like an earthquake.
Eastern world, it is exploding, violence flaring, bullets loading.
5. Mississippi Goddam, Nina Simone, 1964. Some songs spark conversation. This one sparked outright fear. Nina Simone didn't just write Mississippi Goddam, she declared war on racial injustice. And the reaction? Southern states banned it instantly. This wasn't a song about love. It wasn't a feel-good anthem. It was an explosion of frustration, rage, and truth. Alabama's gotten me so upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest. And everybody knows about Mississippi Goddam. The year was 1964. The civil rights movement was at its boiling point. Black Americans were fighting for basic human rights, and the resistance was violent. Then something happened that pushed Nina Simone over the edge. A church bombing in Birmingham, Alabama killed 4 little black girls. And that's when Nina sat down at her piano and poured her fury into a song. She later admitted, "It was my first civil rights song. Up until then, I had never written anything political." But this wasn't just any protest song. Simone didn't sugarcoat anything. She called out racism directly.
Governor Wallace has made me lose my rest. Everybody knows about Mississippi Goddam.
You don't have to live next to me, just give me my equality. The response? Radio stations refused to play it. Not because of explicit content, not because of vulgarity, but because it exposed an ugly truth. In some southern states, radio stations didn't just ban Mississippi Goddam, they went further. They sent the records back to Nina Simone's label, broken in half. A clear message. They weren't just banning the song, they were trying to silence it completely. But the ban didn't work, because while southern states tried to bury Mississippi Goddam, the rest of the country couldn't ignore it. Simone performed it in front of thousands of civil rights activists. She played it at marches. Protesters chanted the lyrics. It became a soundtrack for change. Years later, Nina Simone reflected on the song's impact. It scared people. It made people angry. But it needed to be said. And here's the most powerful part. The title wasn't just a curse, it was a statement. Mississippi wasn't a place. Mississippi was a symbol. It represented every injustice, every racist law, every brutal attack. And Simone wasn't afraid to call it out. This was more than just music. It was defiance. And if you think a song getting banned because it told too much truth is shocking, wait until you hear what happened next. Because the next track, it was banned worldwide. Not for politics, not for protest, but for being too sexy. And when you hear what it sounded like, you'll understand why. Stay with me, because this one made even the Vatican nervous.
Everybody is half dead. Everybody avoids everybody. All over the place, in most situations, most all of the time. I know I'm one of those everybody's. And to me, it is terrible. And so all I'm trying to do all the time is just to open people up so they can feel themselves and let themselves be open to somebody else. That is all. That's it. I've always thought that I was shaking people up, but now I want to go at it more, and I want to go at it more deliberately, and I want to go at it coldly. I want to shake people up so bad that when they leave a nightclub where I performed, I just want them to be to pieces. I want to go in that den of those elegant people with their old ideas, smugness, and just drive them insane. When I'm calm and cool and really got the antenna working, you know when to push and you know when to not. Nobody can tell you though, you have to feel it. In any situation between human beings. It's what makes a groove.
4. Je t'aime moi non plus. Serge Gainsbourg and Jane Birkin, 1969. Some songs get banned for political messages, some for rebellious lyrics. But this one? It was banned because it was simply too intimate. When Je t'aime moi non plus hit the airwaves in 1969, it didn't take long before radio stations started pulling it. The BBC banned it. Italian authorities banned it. Even the Vatican publicly condemned it. But here's the thing. There's nothing vulgar in the lyrics. No explicit words. No direct references to anything inappropriate. So why was it considered so scandalous? Because it wasn't what was said, it was how it was sung. The track features whispered, breathy vocals between Serge Gainsbourg and Jane Birkin, a real-life couple at the time. The melody is slow, sultry, and hypnotic. And Birkin's voice? Let's just say it left little to the imagination. It was so suggestive, people didn't need lyrics to figure out what was going on. The controversy spread like a wildfire. In the UK, the BBC refused to play it on any station. In Spain and Sweden, authorities banned it outright. And in Italy, the government didn't just ban it, they took it even further. They threatened to revoke the record company's license if they kept selling copies. But here's where things get even crazier. All of this censorship, it only made the song more popular. People started hunting down bootleg copies. Some DJs risked their jobs just to sneak it onto the airwaves at night. And in France, it shot straight to #1. Jane Birkin later admitted, "We never expected it to be so controversial. We just thought it was a love song." But Serge Gainsbourg, he knew exactly what he was doing. He had actually written the song years early for Brigitte Bardot, but when they recorded it together, Bardot's husband forbade her from releasing it. So when Gainsbourg met Jane Birkin, he re-recorded it, and this time he wasn't holding back. The result? A song so provocative it was literally outlawed in multiple countries. And yet, despite all the bans, despite all the controversy, it remains one of the most famous French songs ever recorded. But if you think a song getting banned for sounding too sexy is wild, wait until you hear what happened next. Because the next track, it wasn't banned for its sound, it wasn't banned for its lyrics. It was banned because of what it represented. And when you hear how deep this controversy went, you'll see why entire institutions tried to erase it. Stay with me, because this one is still debated today. 3. Dixie. Various artists. Some songs get banned because of drugs, some because of sex, but this one? It was banned because of history itself. Dixie is one of the most controversial songs in American history. It's been played by marching bands, performed by pop stars, and even used in political rallies. But the truth behind the song? It's far darker than most people realize. The melody is upbeat, almost joyful, but the lyrics? They tell a story that divides America even to this day. Originally written in the 1850s, Dixie became the unofficial anthem of the Confederacy during the American Civil War. Southern soldiers marched to it. Confederate leaders praised it. Even President Jefferson Davis declared it the South's battle cry. And that's where the controversy begins. For decades, Dixie was performed as a nostalgic song about the Old South. But to millions of Black Americans, it symbolized something else entirely: slavery, oppression, and racial injustice. As the civil rights movement gained momentum in the 1960s, activists pushed for the song to be banned. Protesters refused to stand when it was played at public events. Schools and universities removed it from their marching band playlists. Some southern states, however, fought to keep it alive. They argued that Dixie was a part of American history, not a political statement. But here's where things get really interesting. Even US presidents couldn't escape the Dixie controversy. In 1969, when President Richard Nixon invited Black leaders to the White House, his military band played Dixie during the event. The result? Outrage. Critics slammed Nixon for sending the wrong message at a time when racial tensions were at an all-time high. Over time, the song started disappearing from public events. By the 1970s, most major radio stations refused to play it. But even today, the debate isn't over. Some argue that Dixie should be preserved as a piece of American history, while others believe it should be permanently erased because of what it represents. Even musicians have struggled with its legacy. Elvis Presley once performed Dixie in his live shows, but as controversy grew, he quietly dropped it from his set list. The real question: can a song ever be separated from its history, or does its past define it forever? One thing is certain: Dixie remains one of the most divisive songs in American music. And if you think this controversy was intense, wait until you hear about the next one. Because the next song? It was so misunderstood, the FBI launched an investigation into its lyrics. And when you hear how absurd the case was, you won't believe it actually happened. Stay with me, because this one is absolutely insane.
Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. And I wish I was in Dixie, hooray.
2. Louie, The Kingsmen, 1963. Some songs get banned for their message, some for their politics. But this one? It got banned for something nobody could even understand. Louie by the Kingsmen is one of the most bizarre censorship stories in music history. It wasn't banned because of what it said, it was banned because people thought it was something dirty. And the best part? The FBI actually investigated it. Let's rewind to 1963. Louie wasn't an original song. It was a cover of a 1957 track by Richard Berry. But when the Kingsmen recorded it, something strange happened. Their version was so sloppy and so garbled that nobody could figure out what the lyrics were. And that's where the trouble began. Parents started panicking. They swore they could hear hidden, obscene lyrics. Rumors spread like wildfire. People claimed Louie contained secret messages about sex, drugs, and all kinds of filth. Indiana's governor called it the filthiest song ever recorded. Schools banned it. Radio stations refused to play it. And then, the FBI got involved. Yes, you heard that right. The Federal Bureau of Investigation actually launched a full-scale probe into the song's lyrics. For 31 months, agents analyzed every note, every word, trying to find proof of obscenity. They even played the record at different speeds to see if it revealed anything explicit. The conclusion? The lyrics were completely indecipherable. The official FBI report stated, "At no time were the lyrics intelligible. That's right, after nearly 3 years, the FBI admitted that the song they were investigating wasn't saying anything dirty at all. But by then, the damage had already been done. The controversy only made the song more popular. Teenagers rushed to buy copies, desperate to hear what all the fuss was about. The band backfired so badly that Louie became one of the most covered songs of all time. And here's where it gets even crazier. Years later, when the Kingsmen were asked about the lyrics, they admitted something hilarious. Even they didn't know what they were saying. Jack Eli, the band's singer, had braces on his teeth when they recorded the song, and he mumbled through the entire performance. So the truth is, millions of people freaked out over lyrics that didn't even exist. And if you think that's wild, wait until you hear about the #1 most controversial banned song. Because this next one, it was banned across the US for just one word. And the band behind it, they were already in hot water with religious groups. Stick with me, because this one had America's biggest radio stations terrified. One, The Ballad of John and Yoko, The Beatles, 1969. Some songs get banned for being too sexual, some for being too rebellious, but this one? It got banned because of just one word. The Beatles were no strangers to controversy. By 1969, they had already faced massive backlash for John Lennon's infamous statement that they were more popular than Jesus. That comment alone led to Beatles record burnings across America, with religious groups calling them blasphemous. So when the Ballad of John and Yoko was released, radio stations were already looking for a reason to ban it. And then they heard this line, "Christ, you know it ain't easy, you know how hard it can be." That one word, Christ, was enough to send religious stations into a frenzy. Christian radio networks flat out refused to play it. Some mainstream stations also pulled it from rotation, fearing backlash from religious groups. The song itself wasn't even about religion. It was John Lennon's retelling of his wedding to Yoko Ono and their struggles with the press. But the moment the word Christ was used in a non-religious context, the ban hammer came down. And this wasn't just a small controversy. The Beatles' entire reputation was on the line. Religious leaders condemned the song publicly. In some parts of America, record stores were pressured not to sell it. The irony? The Battle of John and Yoko was actually the Beatles' last #1 hit in the UK. And here's where it gets even crazier. Most people don't know this, but only 2 Beatles actually played on the song. Paul McCartney and John Lennon recorded it without George Harrison or Ringo Starr. It was one of the last major moments where Lennon and McCartney worked as a duo. Lennon later admitted he knew the song would stir up trouble, but he didn't care. He said, if they're going to get upset over one word, that's their problem. But what happened next showed just how deeply this controversy ran. When the Beatles broke up a year later, many religious groups celebrated it. They saw it as justice for Lennon's Jesus comment and for the Ballad of John and Yoko. To them, the Beatles had gone too far, and their breakup was proof that they had finally paid the price. But if history has proven anything, it's this. Banning a song never makes it disappear. Today, the Ballad of John and Yoko is still played, still streamed, still remembered.
Didn't even give us a chance, Christ, you know it ain't easy. You know how hard it can be.
And that's the real power of music. Because no matter how many times they try to silence a song, it always finds a way to be heard. And now, I want to hear from you. Which band song do you think caused the biggest controversy? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like and subscribe, and check out this next video, because this story is far from over. Music shapes history, and now you know why they try to erase these songs. But there's even more they don't want you to hear. Hit like, subscribe, and watch this next video, because the story isn't over yet. See you there.